And I'm recording. Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com. I'm really excited to add to our library of stories regarding success after prison. Today, I have the most inspiring man you're ever going to meet. In fact, I'm going to try and change the audio portion so we're side by side. I have Jesse de la Cruz, and he is actually Dr. Jesse de la Cruz. But he wasn't always a well-educated leader in society. He started inside of a prison, but that did not stop him from changing his life. I consider Jesse a mastermind. I'm going to call him Dr. De La Cruz to show my respect and admiration for him, because I know how difficult it must have been for him to overcome the challenges that he faced as a young man. Jesse, Dr. De La Cruz, welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. We are speaking to men in prison today. Tell us a little bit about your background in the criminal justice system. When did you get started?
Well, the first time that I went to the juvenile hall, I was 12 years old, and I had run away from home. We lived in a little town, and I ran away from home, and I went to Los Angeles because my sister lived in Los Angeles, and I was intrigued by this whole big city lights and, Whittier Boulevard and the lowriders and all that I saw, right? And I was like, wow. And so my mother, my father, they went and picked me up after about 2-3 days, and they brought me back. And my mother, in her way of thinking, not understanding what she was really doing, committed me to juvenile hall. And of course, they put me on probation. And what happened when I got to juvenile hall was I was introduced with guys that were just like me. They were, looking for the same thing that I was looking for, wanting to fit in, wanting to feel significant, right? Like be somebody, right? Because nobody really paid attention to us. The only time they paid attention to us is if we were getting in trouble. And so the people that I started to look up to were the individuals who were, the gangbangers, but they weren't really gangbangers in my eyes, but I guess society looked at them that way. But the guys that were on the left side, the vato locos, the cholos, whatever you want to call them. I never called them cholos. I always thought they were the vato locos, the crazy ones in the neighborhood. And, they all seemed to have, everything that I wanted. They had respect. They had nice cars. They dressed well. They had the prettiest girls in the neighborhood. They did what they wanted. Nobody got in the way. And they never worked. You know what I mean? And then I looked at my father, I looked up to my father, and I had a good father, and he worked all the time like a donkey in the fields picking fruit, right? From sun up to sundown. And we never had nothing, man. So, I said, well, why would I want to do that when I can do this? So, at a very early age, I was, adopted into the lifestyle, the criminal lifestyle, and became one of the fellas, and then, of course, I began to get schooled, on the aspects of la vida loca, right? The crazy life, right? And, pretty much I was being groomed and taught on what to expect in the future. Going to prison was one of the job descriptions. In other words, you become a gangster, you become a criminal, and one of the job descriptions is you go to prison. That's just the way it is. And everybody I know,
prison was not a stigma to you; it was actually a badge of honor.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, everybody that was anybody in the neighborhood had gone to prison. And at that time, you were talking about in the mid-'60s, right? At that time, there wasn't very many people going to prison. It was only a select few, right? Select few that were going. So to me, I thought, if I go to prison, then I'm one of those guys, right? And sure enough, I did the things that were needed, to be done in order to achieve the status, right? So at the age of 13, we went to another neighborhood, and I was the one with a rifle. There was a 16-shot 22 rifle. They gave it to me. I pulled it out, boom, 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 boom. And I think 3 people were shot. Nobody died, but, 3 people were shot. I shot 3 people. I didn't know who they were. I met them later, but I didn't know at the time who they were. And I remember feeling a sense of, I don't know at the moment I was sort of afraid, but the following day, the recognition that I received from the fellas was like powerful, man. Made me feel like, yeah, okay, I got it. You know what I mean? And then at the age of 16, I stabbed this guy. It wasn't a gang thing, but it was another medal of honor. You know what I mean? Added to my long list. I used to practice in the backyard. I used to have a dummy, and like instead of how you use boxing, well, I would practice with a buck knife, and I would stick, bob, and weave, and I would practice flicking the knife open, whap, so it would pop open. Like right now, I would grind it so it would be really sharp and pointy, and I did all these things in preparation for things such as, if I had to pull it, I would use it. In fact, I quit carrying a knife in 1988 because it became so easy for me. Just like when people disappointed me or people got me angry or whatever the case may be, I would immediately pull my knife and stab them. I stabbed a lot of people, man.
Let me just comment on that, because a lot of the guys in prison may miss the value of what you're providing right now. You're providing a story of how people learn how to stay wrapped up in the criminal justice system. Right. The more we hang around with people of a criminal lifestyle, we start strengthening our mindset around that. We start thinking that violence is normal. And while we're learning those skills, we're also simultaneously learning how not to succeed in society. We're learning how to succeed in prison. And the more we learn how to succeed, if we train our mind to succeed in prison, that's what we're going to get. I know we're going to feature 2 episodes with Dr. De La Cruz, and he's going to be talking about how he shifted that mindset. That's why he's a mastermind, because he is giving us real life examples that if we hang around crime, if we build our confidence through crime and violence, we're just setting ourselves up for a long time in prison. And you experienced a long time in prison. Tell us about your journey through prison, Dr. De La Cruz.
Well, I got to prison in the first time in the November of 1972. I had a B number, a B47659. It was an early B number. And I remember when I got there, I went to Vacaville because at that time, everybody from Northern California went to Vacaville, which was his reception center. And so I got there, and I remember my reputation had already preceded me, right? So everyone that was there, not everyone, but everybody that was somebody, right, knew who I was, right? And so I had a couple of homeboys that had already gone there a couple of days before me. And so when we got there, it was like, I remember feeling like, I've arrived, you know what I mean? It made me feel like powerful, right? It was a little bit daunting as well, but it was also, because I had a 6 months to 15 year sentence, right? And, and so I knew that it was a dangerous place, but I was a dangerous person. So I was fit right in. All of us that were there at the time, everyone that was there, they didn't have drunk drivers back then. They didn't have all these people. They didn't have, a lot of people that they have today in the prison system. They didn't have them. You were a hardcore if you went to prison in 1972. You know what I mean? You just didn't go because you had to be somebody, right?
The funny thing about it is back then in 1972, you had to be somebody. You were truly a threatening, violent,
right,
hardcore dude. But the sentences back then were fundamentally different from what exists today. Right now, you could be just a simple guy. You're going to go to prison and get 20 years like nothing.
It's like, well, what happened, bro? What happened is that my generation, set the foundation and the standard for what we have today. In 1977, bro, SB 42, Senate Bill 42 passed, and that did away with the indeterminate sentence, and then it became the determinate sentence. And I remember telling the fellas, I was in the hole. I was getting ready to get paroled, and I didn't know I was getting ready to get paroled. But when the law passed and they paroled me, I remember I came back. I was in the hole, and I told the fellas, check this out, man. This law, this is not a good law, man. This is a bad law. And so as a result of that law, then they started, building on it. In 78, it changed and it got more serious. That's when they started giving 15 to life and 25 to life on murders, right? Before it was 7 to life. And so they started giving, adding prior prison terms, giving you, just a different, they came at you in various ways where at the end of the thing you had, as opposed to, you knew when back in the old days, if you went for a 6 to 15 and you didn't get in trouble, then you would get out approximately 3 years later, But now, if you took the same case as a result of SB 42, now you're saying, wait a minute, now you're going to do 7 and you're going to do half of that or 2/3 of it. And so now it bumps it up. And then, of course, the next thing that happened, 3 strikes. And then the next thing that happened, you got all these 186.22, the gang enhancement. And see all these laws. So now these youngsters, and then we have technology that makes it real difficult to get away. So you have all these factors, right, that are against you. And you're saying, wow, man. And so youngsters are getting arrested and they're washing them up, man. They're giving them life.
Dr. De La Cruz, I know people that are serving life sentences for selling marijuana today.
Of course.
Life sentences, and marijuana is legal in several states. I mean, we have got this sentencing system that just swallows people into the criminal justice system. And once they get in there, far too few are able to emerge successfully as you have emerged. What type of adjustment pattern did you have while you were going through the multiple terms in prison that you served?
I didn't have any, when I was in prison, I was caught up, bro. I never went to prison, and started to change while in prison. What I did while I was in prison is I started, the first prison term, I got arrested. I got picked up twice for homicide. Nothing happened because back then people weren't telling. So nobody told. Okay. So I didn't get charged with none of that. Then the second time around, I stabbed the guy, only one guy. I didn't get busted, but I only stabbed one guy. So it was every time I went, it was getting less and less. The third time I went, I didn't stab nobody. I just hit this dude and knocked him out and stomped on him a little bit, right? The fourth time, I didn't do anything. The fifth time, I was like, man, I want to change this thing, man. How do I do this stuff? I remember.
Are you saying that on the fifth time that you went into the prison system, you said, I want to change my life. I don't want to be sucked into this prison system anymore?
Yes, I wanted to be free. I wanted to not only be free physically, but I wanted to be free in my mind and my spirit, but I didn't know how to do it, right? And I remember.
How much time were you serving on that sentence, Dr. De La Cruz?
It was only a 3-year sentence. It was a drop in, a drop in the bucket. You know what I mean?
So you were serving a 3-year sentence inside of a high security penitentiary?
Yeah, I was in Folsom State Prison.
So Folsom State Prison, a place that you've already have a very long, hard reputation as a solid, hardcore convict. But in your mind, are we to understand that you're saying, I want to change. I want to leave this world behind, and I want to figure out how I can do it. Is that right?
Exactly. And I didn't know how, bro. And so when I got out, I remember I was on the bus. I got out April 2nd, 1996, the last time that I ever went.
Before you say that, what I'd like to point out, Dr. De La Cruz, is you are the exact teacher that so many people in prison need to hear about, because just as you didn't know how to change back then, there are many people in prison right now who don't know how to change, and they're not going to get that message necessarily from the correctional officers or the system. They need to hear from people just like you. You are a mastermind because you have been able to overcome a lifetime of crime and violence and gang activity and emerged as one of the most successful people to ever come out of a prison system. I mean, you not only are well educated with a doctorate degree, but you're also retained by lawyers and criminal justice systems, and you're respected now by prosecutors and probation officers, and schools bring you in. And I know that you're also a published author. Do you have a copy of your book with you?
Yes, I do.
Why don't you show your book up so that people can see? Hold it a little higher. Detour, My Journey from Darkness to Light. That is by Dr. Jesse De La Cruz. It is one of the most profound books out there because it is a true story. It's not written by a psychologist who didn't experience it. It's written by an individual who truly transformed his life while he was locked for more than 30 years in state prisons, heavily involved in gang activity, in violence, as he's spoken about, and yet he transformed his life and become a true American hero, an individual who has seen darkness but has walked into the light. Tell us a little bit about what your life was like once you decided to change, Dr. De La Cruz.
Well, it was,
How did your homies and the people that you were associated with, how did they respond to your definition that says, I want to be a law-abiding citizen. I want to be a leader. I want to help my people. How did the world respond to that?
well, first of all, I also want to mention that I was a heroin addict. I shot heroin for 30 years. So on top of that, I mean, besides being a criminal, I was also, afflicted with a heroin addiction, right? Every time I got out, that's what I did. So when I got out the very first day that I got out, I didn't want to shoot heroin because I knew that shooting heroin would lead me right back, into the lifestyle. I knew that. But the power of the drug as a result of the insecurities and the lack of confidence and the lack of direction and the lack of not having a plan, when I got out was overwhelming, man. And the thing that I did, my mind said, well, go get a beer, right? So I went and I didn't buy a 6-pack. I bought a 12-pack. I couldn't believe it. And I went to this, I call it the Hilton of the barrio, right? It was the Lion Motel, right? I got a room and I went in there. I drank 1 beer, drank 2 beers, drank 3 beers. And then I went to a bar and I got some dope and I fixed and I OD'd. And I woke up in the morning and I said, damn, man, I did it again, man. God bless. But I don't know why, but I went to the parole department, even though I was under the influence. And the parole agent gave me a pass, man. She was a nice lady, man. It wasn't for her. I don't know if I'd be here today, but she said to me, I'm going to give you a pass. And I threw up in her garbage can right there in the office that day when I seen her. And she still gave me a pass. And so anyway, I didn't show. I showed up the next week and I was still dirty because I was already strung out. And I got caught. I got sucked into the lifestyle again, right? And and then about 30. Let me see. April said June. On June the 4th, I entered a residential treatment center. For me, that's the way I started. I remember I raised my arms and I said, "Okay, man." I was talking to God, and I don't know if you guys believe in God, but I do. And I said, "Okay, man, I surrender, man." You know what I mean? And I heard the voice. Now I didn't know what was going to happen, but I bumped into this guy like 2 hours later who was a liaison between the courts and the treatment centers. And I didn't know him, but he knew me of me. And so he got me into a treatment center. The lady, the parole agent, lifted the parole at large warrant. I got into treatment. And then I got scared, bro, because these people were talking about being honest, right? And I had never been honest in my entire life. All I knew is I'm not going to be honest, right? So I didn't talk. And I was watching, and these people were talking about, we're going to love you until you love yourself. And I was like, man, I just had all these conflicting emotions, right? But I knew that I wanted to stay out. And I saw people that were somewhat like me that were doing the deal. And they also had a glow about them, right? So I started paying attention, man. And I would go to these groups and I would listen. I never raised my hand. I never said nothing, but I was like a sponge, soaking up all this information and then disseminating it in my mind while I was sitting down, trying to figure out, okay, I can use this, or maybe I'll try this, or maybe I'll try that, you see? And it was just like...
Dr. De La Cruz, I just got to point out again for our listeners, just the wisdom that you are dispensing. And I want people to pay attention. What Dr. De La Cruz is telling us is once he saw people who were just like him transforming their lives, once he made that 100% commitment to say, I surrender, I want to change my life, I don't want to be sucked up into the prison system anymore. Once he made that commitment, he started looking at people who were changing. He became all of a sudden more receptive to that message that he can do it also. And if you're listening to this podcast, to this webinar right now, and you are locked inside of a prison, I want you to be looking or listening to the wisdom of Dr. De La Cruz, because he's an individual who is just like you. He was locked in a jail cell for more than half of his life. He decided to make a change. He started to look for role models like the people around him, people that he could see himself in. And once he made that commitment, opportunities began to open for him. What more did you experience as you went through this transformation, Dr. De La Cruz?
You know, I never cried back in the day. You know, I've heard people say that they cried in the middle of the night and when they were alone in their cell. I never even thought about crying, bro. Because remember, I had made a decision. That's what I wanted to do. So I never thought about crying or, you know, I don't even remember really feeling a lot of loneliness when I was in the penitentiary, right? Because I always felt that that's where I belong, you know. But then as I you know, came back and got older, I remember one day I was sitting in the hole because I did a lot of time in the hole as well. I remember thinking, man, I'm not supposed to be sitting in a cage like some caged animal, man. You know, how can I change this? I remember thinking that. And then I opened up my mind a little bit, swallowing that cell. And I got scared. I said, oh, hell no. And I closed the door. You know what I mean? But when I was in the program, when I was on the streets, I opened my mind and I became willing, even though I didn't even know that I was willing, right? I didn't know that I had, you know, said, okay, man, I'm going to have faith in something bigger than me, right? Something bigger than me, which was God and the people that he was putting in my path. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't always nice. There was days when I wanted to sock people in the mouth because I found out that violence was one of my big problems. And I did sock a guy in the mouth when I was in the trip. And I hit him and knocked him to the ground. He did that little fish thing, you know, when they bounce around. And I said, but to me, now watch, to me, the growth was I didn't stomp on him. More importantly, I felt bad about hitting the guy, man. I was like, damn, man. So I had developed somewhat of a little conscience, right? And I didn't get caught, you know? So
you know, the same thing happened to you earlier. It's just that you shifted your mindset. When you were a young man, you were telling us that you felt great when you shot somebody. You felt great when you stabbed somebody. You were positioning yourself to do wrong. But once you made that shift and you said, I want to do better, all of a sudden your mind started to feel recognized, man, I shouldn't be doing this. I want a better life. This is going to get me sucked back in. And that is exactly what we're talking about. If you're sitting inside of a prison right now, you've got to be listening to the wisdom of Dr. De La Cruz. He's somebody that's experienced both sides. He's walked, as his book says, from darkness to light. And he is telling you that the path to redemption, the path to success, we're going to have another episode with Dr. De La Cruz where we're going to hear about his extraordinary success. But I really urge you, if you are living in struggle or adversity right now, the time is right now to begin changing. Enroll in an education program, enroll in a substance abuse treatment program, start deciding who your role models are, and you will not find a better role model than Dr. Jesse De La Cruz. Dr. De La Cruz, please continue with your story. I just wanted to point that out for our listeners.
So I'm gonna use a metaphor, okay? So for the guys that are in prison, and I didn't know this at the time because, like I said, I wasn't trying to find another way until the very end. So what I learned was this: when I was a young kid, my toolbox was completely empty. It was empty, you know. And as I navigated my way through the world that I lived in, I began to acquire the tools that I believed would be necessary for me to be able to succeed and, you know, be someone important and how to navigate my way in that particular world. So I got these tools. So violence was an important tool for me at that time. So when I came into this new way of living, what I had to do was I had to empty out that toolbox. Violence, I threw it out. I threw it out. Now, I brought it back in when I hit that guy, but then I threw it out again, right? Because the next time that I got into a situation where I was feeling disrespected or whatever the case may be, I didn't hit the guy. I only slapped him. I didn't hit him. I slapped him. Now,
let me just point that out, because what we're talking about here is recognizing what is the philosophy that is guiding our decisions. I can tell you, those of you who have gone through the Earning Freedom Mastermind course where I talk about my own bad decisions as a young man, I say I had a bad philosophy when I was a kid.
Exactly.
I had a bad philosophy. It wasn't until I got exposed to masterminds like Socrates or Nelson Mandela or Dr. Jesse de la Cruz that I started to say, wait a minute, let me start thinking about things differently. Let me start thinking about my avatars, the people I want to meet. I want to have a role model like Jesse. What would Jesse expect from me? And how am I going to grow? But you don't, so a lot of people, you don't change overnight. And sometimes you can fall down. But if you change your philosophy, you give yourself the strength to pick yourself back up and to recognize I can find that strength within. That's what you experienced. At least that's what I'm hearing from your story.
That's exactly right. So it took me 4 years. The next guy, I only verbally abused him. You know what I mean? I didn't put my hands on him at all. Right. And then after a fourth time that happened, I walked away and I was like angry, man. I was so angry. I had to pull over because I was shaking in my car. I was like, man. And then I remember thinking, then as soon as that happened, I said, hey, you know what? You didn't cuss him out. You didn't put your hands on him. Man, you did it, man. And so after that, it became easy. Like now it's like, I have developed this skill, which I tolerate people now. It's not about patience for me, because patience to me indicates that I'm expecting something from somebody. But if I tolerate you and love you unconditionally, hey, whatever, man, you do what you're going to do. It doesn't have any reflection on me. If you wanted me to help you, I'll help you. If not, I'll be around when the time comes, right? But like you said, something altered my imagination, right? And I think what altered my imagination was I was ashamed of what I had become, bro.
And you know what? Now you've got so much pride and honor and dignity in what you have become that nothing is going to take you off of that track. That's the beauty of this. When you're wrapped up in this misguided, bad philosophy where you think you're going to distinguish yourself and get respect through violence, you get angry and you never want to lose that. And that's why so many people get wrapped up in this cycle of failure, because they got the bad philosophy. But once you get the right philosophy, the Dr. De La Cruz is teaching, then, now I'm not going to do anything that's going to threaten my position in society. Now I'm a doctor. People respect me. I make a lot of a high income from my work. I've got value in what I do. That's the beauty of growth. And anybody can do it only if they follow the wisdom that Dr. Jesse de la Cruz is dispensing through this group webinar that we're spending together today, but also in his phenomenal book, Detour, which I encourage you to get. And I will definitely have links to that on the show notes at michaelsantos.com and Success After Prison. Dr. de la Cruz, we are coming to the end of this episode. We're going to come back, and I'd love for you to talk with us about what happened for you once you had that change in philosophy and how your world opened up. But we've got about 1 minute left in this episode. I'd love it if you just give your last parting guidance to people who are in prison and penitentiaries across the United States that need to learn from you. Do you have any final words that you'd like to say in this episode?
Yeah, one of the things that I refrained from doing was running around preaching at the beginning. I felt that the best message that I could give people was by showing them. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to show you, right? So I began to do all these things that were not expected of me. In other words, I was nice. I was always respectful, but I was nice now, in addition to being respectful. I used to bump into the fellas, and I would say, hey, Holmes, how you doing, man? Man, you look good, man. And they didn't look good, but, everybody wants to hear that, right? So I say, you know what, man, check this out, Holmes. Because I didn't want to interact with them. And I would say, look, man, I got to go see my parole agent. And they would say, all right, man, I'll see you next time, man. Okay? Hey, but take care of yourself, bro. Boom. And I would leave. So I don't think what happens a lot of times is we go out and we want to change, and we start talking and we start preaching and we did this and we start talking, and then we fall and everybody says, you see, I told you, man. That's why I didn't open my mouth at the beginning, because I would say, nah, man, I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I don't want to fall and hurt more people in the end by falling, because they're going to be looking up to me. Now they look up to me. They come to my house or wherever, and they say, "Hey, man, how did you do it?" And I say, "Come on, let's go. Let's go get a cup of coffee, man." And we go and we start talking, and mostly I listen to them, because the truth of the matter is that most of the guys that are looking at this video today, or whenever they look at it, is this: we are very talented people, man. We have skills, man, that most people don't have. We have the ability to navigate our way in a world that is filled with everything dark, and we make it. And that takes skill. That takes skill. We have the ability. Actually, I have had the opportunity to live 2 lives in 1 lifetime. So I can go into their world because I know their world, the dark world. And no big deal. I can go in it. I know how to do it. I haven't forgotten. I haven't forgotten how to be an idiot. I was an idiot for 30, 45 years. You know what I'm saying? I've only been a good guy for 20. So idiocy is a lot more than, I've only been a good guy for 20 years, bro. Right? So I can revert like right now. You know what I mean? But what happens is that now I have a conscience. I've developed a conscience. And that's what I want the people that are looking at this is one of the things that you have to do. You have to do it, is develop a conscience. That doesn't mean that you have to get weak, bro. That just means that you develop a conscience, and that's it.
Dr. De La Cruz, we're going to come back with our next episode and talk about developing that conscience, but we got to close here because the CD will only take about 33 minutes, and we're coming close to that end. So I want to make sure we capture this. We use it. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, where we have just heard wisdom from Dr. Jesse De La Cruz, author of Detour, My Journey from Darkness to Light. Is that what it's called, Dr. De La Cruz?
That's it.
And I really encourage you to read that book because it is the pathway to success through darkness. We'll be back with episode 2 with Dr. De La Cruz, and we are going to hear just about the phenomenal life he has created for himself, bringing value to society. Why? Because he developed a conscience. Stay tuned. Thanks.